Welcome back. This is Lee and Allison from the Law School Toolbox, and today we are going to be talking about what you can do now to get ready for law school. Well, that is a great segue into our last question for today, which is, what practical life arrangements should I make before classes begin? Because this is really, I think, how you can keep your own personal system up and running, right?
Right.
Making sure that you're fed and you're moving your body and you have a good living situation. All of these things can really be set up before school starts.
Yeah, and I think these are things that you want to think about over the summer, because once school starts, it's going to be a lot harder to think about them. So, I mean, hopefully if people have been living on their own in university or whatnot, you have some sense of how to take care of yourself, but it might have been that you were just eating on campus every day and you didn't really, pay attention to that. I mean, law schools vary. Some have meal plans, some don't, but I think it's fair to say you're probably going to be doing more of your own life arrangements than you did in undergrad.
Yeah, which means you've got to feed yourself. And although there will be a lot of pizza on campus, you don't want to eat that pizza all the time. It's not going to make you feel very good.
No, I think, even figuring out how you're going to do meal planning. And if you're not familiar with cooking basic things, the summer is a great time to learn that. It doesn't have to be anything super complicated, but if there are meals that you like, ask someone to teach them to you so you can make them yourself. For one thing, that's going to save you a ton of money most places than eating out all the time. Yes.
And doing batch cooking. So you cook on the weekends and then you have food for much of the week. I think that's really great. If you are not a great chef and you do not enjoy making your own food, which is totally fine, I do think it's important then you figure out what else you can do. So a lot of times your loved ones in your life will ask what they can do to help. And it's possible that you could say, could you freeze me some meals? Can you make me soups and have just soups in my freezer, or, portions of lasagna or whatever it is that you like to eat. But I do think that that's a great way to allow people to show up for you in a way that would be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think people want to do that type of thing. I mean, they might fund you some type of meal program. If you're willing to open up a bunch of plastic bags and throw it together in a pan, you could do HelloFresh or something.
That's true.
And maybe that's training wheels to get you started, or maybe you do it a couple of times a week. But I do think just thinking through, where am I going to get groceries? Like, how am I going to store them? How am I going to cook them? What do your cooking facilities even look like, depending on what your housing looks like? That might vary a lot. You might be in a dorm style thing with a shared kitchen, or you might be in an apartment that has a full kitchen. Like, who knows? But all of these things I think are worth looking into, because again, like if you have to furnish the kitchen, then you need to get pots and pans or whatever it is. You want to understand the situation that you're going to be in so that you can plan accordingly and not be shocked at the last minute and say, oh my gosh, like I'm not going to have access to a refrigerator. What? That's not great when suddenly you're trying to start classes.
Yeah, it's so true. I also think it's important to keep in mind, what is your support system going to look like? I think that if you're relocating, especially for law school, it can be hard to not have your friends or family around. So you may want to carve out time to hang out with new people and make new friends. I was reading an interesting book. I can't remember which one. I've read a lot of books recently, but it was talking about how many hours it takes as an adult to make a good friend. And I'm just going to throw numbers out that I think are right. But it was something like 100 hours to make an initial friendship connection. And as a child or in undergrad, you spend 100 hours with someone really fast. It does not take that long. But as an adult, 100 hours talking to someone is actually a really long time. I wonder how many hours we've talked to each other over the last decade plus.
Many.
many. But I thought that was interesting, because you do see adult friendships, it takes longer, but part of it is we just don't have as much time. And so it may feel hard to create some new relationships, and you may feel a little lonely, or that you haven't found your people. So you want to either find your people through a different activities, maybe outside the law school, or just know that you can rely on your other support network to kind of get you through until you do develop some of those friendships.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think it's difficult, but also beneficial to try to develop some relationships that are not solely based on law school. Because, yeah, you get thrown in, you're going to spend 100 hours together really quickly, but then you also end up in this very, very pressure cooker situation where everyone's concerned about the same things, everyone's competing for the same things. And like those people can be great supports, don't get me wrong, but I think it's also nice to have somebody outside of that, whether it's in an activity that has nothing to do with law school or something like that, that you can go to and say, hey, I just need a breather. Like, can we go take a walk around the park with our dog or whatever, and not talk about law school? Because I think it does become so all encompassing for people.
Yeah, I think it's great to have a little bit of perspective. Now, sometimes it can be frustrating. I typically would date people not in law school, and then you'd have to have some conversation where about, study time, where I'd be like, okay, I will not see you for a week. And I remember this one guy being like, but like, we can see each other on Saturday. I was like, no, I have to do work. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, I will not see you. Sorry. Like, he was he was not particularly understanding. He did not last very long. So.
Right. I mean, fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, don't even get started on like dating your classmates.
Yeah, that's its own thing.
That's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast.
Just maybe put that to the side for the first semester. Just gonna say.
Yeah. I also think it's really important to take a look at your finances. If you are living off of loans, you may want to make sure that you understand what that is. If you've never had a budget, if you've just been able to kind of make it work, it might be a great time over the summer to set up You Need a Budget. We have some great podcasting episodes from You Need a Budget about how to think about money and being a student. I think those are really powerful. And if you've never spent time thinking about that, I think that's a great thing to do over the summer.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everyone in law school needs a budget. Like, you only have a certain amount of money to make it to the end of the semester. You need to be able to eat at the end of the semester. So figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think things like just basic scheduling, how are you going to have time to work on things? Like, when are you going to do other things? Those are things you can start doing now in the summer. You don't have, you can't probably get the exact dates of your classes, but you can kind of get a general sense of what your week is going to look like. What are you going to plan to do on the weekends? Do you have a block to do your laundry and errands? I think that's totally legitimate. Are you going to take some time off every weekend? Like, you can go ahead and put that into your schedule and then adjust it later, but at least you have something to start with.
Yeah. And just know what you really need. I think that maybe there are some hacks, right? How do you do laundry the most efficiently? Like, where can you go, especially if you've already relocated, figuring out how you're going to do that. Or some cities, wash and fold is much more practical than using a laundromat.
Yeah, so many people in New York did that just because our laundry situation was like not great. And again, it depends on what you have. If you have an apartment with a built-in washer dryer, yay for you. That's not a problem. If you're in an apartment in New York City and they have 3 coin ops for the entire building and 2 of them aren't working most of the time, that's a different problem.
Yeah. I also think that, looking at your transportation, how are you going to get places? If you're moving to a new city and perhaps you're not going to have a car, do you understand how you're going to get everywhere? Especially carrying all the books, because it's a lot of stuff to carry. So walking for an hour may not be that pleasant if you have to haul like a ton of stuff with you. So I think that's really important, as well as, of course, figuring out a housing arrangement. You don't want to be couch surfing at the beginning of the semester. I definitely had a friend second year who slept in my living room on the floor for like 3 weeks because he couldn't get an apartment.
No, one of my roommates, my second year, who came in as a first year, they didn't have space for her for the first 3 weeks, and she just showed up at our door one day, and I'm like, what have you been doing for the last almost month? She's like, oh yeah, just sleeping on people's couches. That's not a great way to start things.
Not a great way
it wasn't her fault, but at the same time I was like, that's pretty shitty.
If you can avoid it, avoid that experience.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, along with your support network and trying to create good habits, is make sure that you've got your kind of like sleep hygiene and your whatever sort of movement, workout routines. Go to all those doctor's appointments over the summer. Like, please don't go do the eye doctor and the dentist and your gyno appointments and your annual physical like in September. That's just not a really great use of your time.
No, and I think the same with your car. You mentioned if you're going to have a car, you want to make sure you've got your oil changed and like everything's like up to date and you have new wiper blades, anything that you think you can need in the next like 4 months, just go ahead and try to get it done now.
Did you delay getting the real ID? Now's your moment. Go do it. Apparently, like I've done this years ago, but I think there are a lot of people who haven't done it yet. So,
I know you made me do it years ago.
I did.
Came around, I was like, wait, did everyone do this years ago? I'm like, oh, I guess not everyone has a lead in their life.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, those things can be a huge time waster and a stressor when you're already stressed with school. So anything you can do to lighten your load. And I think my last consideration here would be everyone's going to ask you what they can do to help. That's what like family and friends do. And so have some answers for them. If it's food, like ask them to make meals. If it's to take your dog for a walk, ask them that. If it's to, have a standing phone call, if it's to buy you DoorDash gift cards, whatever it might be, just give them a suggestion of what could be helpful. I'm sure you can think of something that would be helpful. And you just want to get the help that you need to really, set you up for success.
I agree. It's a team effort. So let the team help.
Exactly. Well, I think we're about out of time. Any final thoughts for getting your life ready for law school?
I would just say try to think of all the things that you think might come up in the next 6 months, whether that's having medicine that you need or appointments or whatever, and just try to get as much of it either automated or taken care of now so that you can really clear your plate and like commit wholeheartedly to this new experience.
Yeah. I would also say have a little fun. The summer before law school is also a great time to go on a trip, take that road trip you've wanted to take. I had been working, so I had some disposable income, and I went to Costa Rica for part of July before I went to law school, and we had a blast. I recently was going through those pictures. It was fun to go do something completely different and be somewhere completely new. And it just felt like a good send-off. So I think trying to find some space to have some fun, to blow off some steam, and to kind of reward yourself for getting ready to go do something hard.
Yeah, I agree. And also like see all of your friends that you might not see for a while, whether you have happy hours or whatever, like make that little bit of effort, I think, and then you'll have a nice memory to look back on when you're miserable in the library in November and thinking, why in the world did I do this? And then you can probably call that person and they'll be like, you know what? This is what you told me at that happy hour. So I'm going to echo that back to you now.
Yes. And then you can do as my good friend did to me and say, wow, you should really not wear that fleece anymore. But you've been wearing that fleece for like a month.
We need our friends sometimes to point these things out to us.
She's like, don't you have any other clothes in your closet, friend?
Maybe I'll send you a new sweater.
Exactly. All right. Well, with that, we are out of time. If you enjoyed this video, please take a second to give us a like, leave us a comment, and make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any future content. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us on the contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com.